Yes, we have Susan Berkowitz in the studio. Yes, speech and language pathologist Susan Berkowitz. And Susan, you have so many credits here. It would take me the next 20 minutes to go through them all. But you've been at SLP for more than 40 years, and you've concentrated predominantly on AAC. Tell us what AAC is for those that don't know.
AAC stands for Alternative Augmentative Communication. And so for people who need an alternative to speech because they can't speak or don't speak, or for people who need their speech augmented because they are either not intelligible enough or they don't have enough language to meet all of their communication needs. And so we look at everything, the full gamut from body language, facial expression, signs, which is where I started with AAC in the 70s, before there were pictures. Any other mode that can enhance the person's ability to communicate.
Okay.
And make them an effective communicator.
And you've also written a book called Make the Connection,
Yes.
which is a practical guide to parents and practitioners who are teaching the nonverbal child to communicate.
Yes.
So
in my 40 some odd years as a speech pathologist working with kids who have minimal communication skills or who communicate in ways that we would probably not prefer them to, I have heard sort of two different sides. One, constantly parents just frustrated and unhappy and crying and not getting the information they need. And I think in schools we tend to forget about the parents. We're the educational setting. And so when I do trainings in school districts, I always say, you've got to invite the parents. You've got to invite the parents. Otherwise, there's no place for the parents to get this information.
right.
The other side of the coin is speech pathologists who don't all get background in augmentative communication. It's not a required course in grad school. Many grad school programs don't have somebody to teach it. And so the speech therapists aren't getting the information either. And so my working title originally was Parents and Professionals as Partners. I wanted both sides to be on the same page, to be working with the same goals in mind, with the same information, and a step-by-step, here's the roadmap. You do this, and then this, and then this, and then this. Speech therapists don't want another textbook. They don't have time to read another textbook.
Right.
They don't want to wade through it and try and figure out what the heck they're supposed to take out of it. And parents, of course, aren't looking at texts for speech pathology. They want information. They want it distilled. They want it easy. They don't want to have to go to 50 sites on Google to find what they're looking for. And so this was my attempt to get that information into the hands of everybody who needs it.
Right, because you say a lot of our schools are failing our kids who are nonverbal.
They are. And it's not deliberate for the most part, I'll say. It's just that they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And so...
Which is horrifying.
It is.
In 2019, when the information is there, it's horrifying
really
that a place of education hasn't taken the time to be educated about this very important part of our population. It's infuriating, but it's wonderful that there are people like you where the connection can be made. So talk to us a little bit about what do you think the thing is that's holding parents back and away from, we see a lot of parents who, as soon as somebody says to them, we want to do an assistive device to help your child to be able to speak, there's a lot of pushback from parents. What do you think is causing that, and how do you get around that?
Well, there are a couple of things in play. One is that parents are afraid their child will become dependent on a communication device, and they want them to talk.
Yeah.
Every parent wants their child to talk, and unfortunately that's just not always in the cards. Or maybe it's down the road, but in the meantime the child needs a way to communicate so he's not banging his head against the wall or banging our head against the wall.
Right.
So so we want there to be some way for them to be able to communicate. And in fact, anecdotally, we saw this for years, and finally there's been research to bear this out, that if a child has potential to speak, teaching them to use augmentative communication consistently will always increase their speech.
So it's the opposite of what parents think.
It's absolutely the opposite. Then we get parents and teachers and school personnel who say, well, wait, we're still working on speech. And the problem is that when they're still working on somebody's speech at 8 or 9 or 10, they're not getting the language that they need, they're not being able to communicate, and we've got bigger problems. Either they withdraw or they act out.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way they have to communicate.
Right. Now, you said there are 3 top ways you can better communicate with your child, the 3 top tips for getting AAC going. What are those?
Okay, so the first is the use of what we call aided language stimulation or aided input. It's basically modeling, and we know that our kids learn through modeling. And so we need to think about picture-based communication as a foreign language, which is basically is. Kids learn to talk by listening to us talk. They learn English because we're talking English. In France, they learn French. Kids who are using pictures to communicate haven't had any of those models of people using that language to communicate. So that's the biggest thing is modeling and doing it consistently. All the time, I say. Then I get that deer in the headlights look from people, and I say, nope, you're going to start with one activity. Make it easy. One thing you're comfortable with that motivates the child. Find your keywords to model and start there. And when you're comfortable, throw in another activity. So modeling is the number 1 step.
Okay.
The second step is engaging. Your kid needs to be motivated. They're not motivated by things like, find, see, find, pop. No, that doesn't get it. We need real, genuine communication. The child has to want to communicate. They don't want to be tested. They don't want to talk about necessarily what we want to talk about all the time. So find things that are engaging to them. And I don't care if that means you're going to spend the next hour lining up cars in a row. So be it. Engage with him. And then third is use of what we call core words. Core words are the words that are used the most in a language. They are fairly universal. They are they are verbs, pronouns, adjectives, words that are reusable in many contexts. As opposed to nouns or labels, which we think is perfect to teach kids first because they're concrete and they're easy to learn and it will teach them to say what they want. But unfortunately, nouns don't carry the meaning in language. And you make a request, I give it to you, we're done communicating. Like, now what?
Right.
In terms of all the different functions or purposes for communication, requesting is kind of a dead end. Whereas commenting and describing and those other functions of language are so much more useful socially, personally, academically, all the way around.
Do you feel like a lot of speech and language pathologists miss that point?
Yeah.
We have a lot of parents who will write in and say that their kids were taught labels.
Yeah.
That that's what they were taught, and they will say, how come we never got to conversation? And our kids went through the CARD program, so they were taught manding, which is learning the labels and requesting those things. But then our kids were taught in the ABA world, they call it the interverbals, which is what leads to the conversation. And when I talk to parents about, talk to your speech and language pathologist, a lot of them come back and say they have no idea what I'm talking about.
No, they don't.
That's
and again,
frustrating.
it is frustrating. I sort of see 2 sides to it. I can defend speech pathologists and tell you that it's not part of most graduate programs.
And these are good people.
Yeah.
These are good people who know a great deal
Do.
about a lot of stuff,
Right.
like, making the sound and where in the mouth do you make the sound and getting the sound production out. I don't want to, there are some great
they're
speech
fabulous.
and language pathologists, but for this component of it,
Yeah.
it's missing.
They can't teach what they don't know, what
Yeah.
they haven't learned. And so part of that is the fault of the graduate programs, and a lot of us have been lobbying ASHA for the last number of years to make AAC a required course. Not happening yet. On the other hand, the part of me that doesn't have a lot of sympathy for some of these people is you have to get your continuing education units every year.
Yeah.
I see frequently, and not all the time by any means, but frequently, I will see people take safe courses. Things they know about, that they're comfortable with, and they can take a little more to learn about it, and they don't have to think too hard, and it's easy, as opposed to looking for those opportunities for things that they don't know anything about and need
Right.
to learn about.
Well, this is all in the book, and we want to encourage
is.
people to come.
Yeah, where can they get
Yeah,
it?
where can they get the book?
It's available on Amazon.
Okay,
Wonderful.
Make the Connection, a practical guide to parents and practitioners for teaching the nonverbal child to communicate with AAC.
And unfortunately, we're out of time.
We're out of time.
It goes so
Okay.
fast.
It does.
And can people? Do you have a website or a place where people
Yes.
can reach out to you personally if
Absolutely.
they have questions? Okay.
You can reach me at languagelearningapps@gmail.com.
Okay.
And the book has its own website, which is maketheconnectionbook.com.
Okay, great.
And I believe there's a contact me form on there as well.
Okay, fantastic. Right,
Thanks,
Susan,
Jill.
thank you for joining us
Thank
today.
you.
Very interesting
And thank
information.
you for all your work with all of our kids.
Thanks.
And unfortunately, we
We're
pretty
out of
much
time.
have to sign off.
Yes.
We're well past time and we have to get out the door. But I will be back here tomorrow with another live show. We got a great cavalcade of guests, including Bonnie Yates will be with us. So
Okay.
make sure that you tune in tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me.
And yourselves a hug from me. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye for now.